Right, what's happening, people, and welcome back to Joey and Josh. I'm following on from the success of our last two episodes where we covered the disappearance of Madeleine McCann. We thought that we would bring you guys yet another mystery disappearance case coming from the UK, a case that has been unsolved with more questions rather than answers for over 15 years, and that is the vanishing of Claudia Lawrence.
And this case is not just about the disappearance itself. It is all about the handling from the police, but also potentially from the BBC themselves. It's got intricacies, it's got twists and turns in it, and it's something that I have to say very much thank you to you for putting me onto, because I hadn't heard of this case until you told me about it. And I've done a lot of research since, and wow, there is a lot to cover.
Yeah, I think when you speak about that handling as well, the Claudia Lawrence case wasn't just handled badly by the police. I think it was handled badly by members of the public, the community. Obviously, like you say, the mainstream media, the newspapers really do, to a degree, have blood on their hands with this case. Some of the stories that were printed, the headlines, the portrayals of Claudia herself. I think it's best that we start off with me giving you and the viewers at home a synopsis of this case. Claudia Lawrence, daughter of Joan and Peter, was born on February 27th, 1974 in the village of Moulton, North Yorkshire. She was born into a middle-class family, with her father being a solicitor, her mother Joan being part of the town's council, and also served as Moulton mayor for a period of time. However, Claudia didn't really follow in her parents' footsteps, and although being privately educated, was way more keen to get out and experience the world in all of its beauty herself. And she did so through her work, entering the catering industry first through college, and then by working multiple jobs in restaurants and hotels. And Claudia also frequented the island of Cyprus, and although it's not known exactly how many times, it is known that Claudia visited Paphos in Cyprus on several occasions and had spoke to some people about even considering moving to the island. By the time Claudia was 35 years old, she worked as a chef in the University of York's Goodricke College. The college was around 3 miles from her home, and she usually travelled to work by car. However, on the evening of the 18th of March, Claudia spoke separately to both her father and her mother on the phone. She told her mother that she would need to get an early night due to the fact that her car was in for repair, meaning that instead of her usual short drive, she'd need to wake up at around 5 a.m. the following morning just so that she could make it in time for her shift, which started at 6 a.m. Now, when she spoke to her father on the phone that evening, that would be the last time anyone ever officially heard from Claudia Lawrence.
Now, Claudia had a lot of friends, both in the area of York, but also abroad, because she loved going to Cyprus. And in fact, the main area that she liked was Paphos in Cyprus, wasn't it? She actually got a text message that night, and actually apparently did she send one back to the friend in Cyprus that evening after the telephone call?
Yeah, so after the telephone calls, separate telephone calls of her parents, she texted a friend who was residing in Paphos at the time, had previously actually worked in the Nag's Head, which was the pub a few doors up from herself. She sent that message at 8:23 p.m. UK time to that friend. She received a message back from that friend around 9:10. However, it was confirmed by police that although the message was received, the message from that friend was never opened from Claudia's phone. Now, the following morning, Claudia never turned up for her 6 a.m. shift at work, and that evening didn't answer calls nor turn up for arranged drinks with friends at the local pub, as I said, the Nag's Head, just a few doors up from Claudia's house. Those friends became immediately concerned due to the fact that Claudia was very punctual, very reliable, always kept in contact, and therefore they would go on to tell her father, who the next day also could not contact Claudia.
I was afraid we might just find Claudia lying on the floor.
Peter Lawrence reports his daughter missing to North Yorkshire Police, and the police search her home. There is deemed to be no sign of a break-in, no sign of attack, an abduction, or even a struggle. All that is missing is Claudia's chef whites, the the rucksack that she usually takes them in, and her mobile phone. In the kitchen is a cereal bowl with a spoon, and all of this is enough evidence to indicate the police that Claudia did in fact leave for work that morning. Images are immediately spread around town of Claudia. They're put on lampposts, they're put on traffic lights, and news starts to circulate in the local press. This case really blew up. It captured the imagination of the public. It went on terrestrial TV at prime time, and there were sightings, there were tip-offs, there were leads. However, 15 years on, it still remains completely unsolved as to what happened to Claudia Lawrence. But before we continue, I just want to give a huge shout out to everyone so far that has become a member of the channel. Not only does it put us in a position where we're able to bang out these videos for you guys, it gives you exclusive perks, including live streams that only go out live to the members up to 3 days before it drops for the general public on YouTube. So thank you very, very much to everyone that has become a member, and if you want to get involved, please do so by hitting the join button below or the link in the description. Let's get back into it.
So the police have I suppose a version of events, right? They say that she left in the morning, very early, about 5 o'clock in the morning, from her home and walked towards the university campus where she worked. Now, apparently there were 2 sightings of people that matched her description during that walk. Now, there's no CCTV evidence of her walking away from her home, so all we've got really are these 2 accounts. So why don't we go through those in detail now?
Yeah, they were both very similar, to be honest. There were 2 accounts from 2 separate people who didn't have any involvement with each other. So the fact that the stories matched up quite well means that these 2 people definitely saw the same incident. And the reason I call it an incident is because it was a man and a woman what seemed to be having an argument, right? The woman matched Claudia's apparent description. However, obviously, being that this was in the immediate aftermath, this is something that I always question a little bit, and we'll get back to the reason why I question it when we speak about the police and the handling of the case. However, at face value, the woman matched Claudia's description, and the man she was arguing with, one of the people that reported it, didn't get a good look at the man. However, all they could say was that he was smoking a cigarette, and he was smoking it with his left hand. The other person was able to give a description of the man. They said that he was smoking a cigarette with his left hand. Once again, they said he had a hood up. However, they could see he had a receding hairline. That was all there was to those 2 sightings. Now, the reason why those sightings, I believe, are quite significant is because, let's say, for example, if that sighting was you in the aftermath of that, it's not a crime to have an argument with your partner. Me and you have plenty.
Yeah, we have all the time.
There you go.
We have
there you go.
all the time.
And,
we couldn't even agree with the timelines of these events.
Exactly. Neither can the police, apparently. But what I'm saying is, no one came forward to go, oh, that was just me. I was on my way to work and my missus was doing my head in and we had an argument. So no one ever came forward to say, that was me that they saw. And you would imagine in such a high profile case they could. So that was why the police took those sightings quite seriously and why it set them on the timeline that they had.
Now, weren't there some sightings of her in Cyprus, or proposed sightings of her in Cyprus? Wasn't that something that the police had been identified and drawn to?
Yeah, there was. And obviously there was actually searches for her in Cyprus. But the problem with these tip-offs that came from saying I've seen Claudia in Cyprus is, firstly, as you can see from behind us, Claudia is your average looking woman. Many women at that time did look like Claudia and whatnot. And secondly, none of these sightings were deemed that significant, I think, because they only actually got reported after the press started to run with the stories that she could have potentially escaped to a secret life in Cyprus or something like that. There was actually a 999 call made and a report from a hoaxer that he had found Claudia Lawrence's body while he was walking his dog. He was arrested and cautioned. Even weirder, around this time, 2009, right, Facebook is just sort of taking off. Someone went to the lengths of creating a Facebook profile and posting messages saying they were Claudia and that they were safe, and even trying to get into contact with family and things like that. That person was also arrested. So there were plenty of people sort of trying to, get their fingers in on this case, and plenty of hoaxing going on around it.
So I think it's fair to say that there's not a lot of people coming forward and trying to give some evidence or insight, witness statements around this case. Basically, it seems like there's loads of dead ends. And I actually saw there was an interview with Peter Blexley. Have you seen this guy?
Yeah, like Peter Blexley.
And basically, ex-police officer, now YouTuber. And he said that people were being warned off the case, weren't they? Like people, journalists, and also people looking into it are being told not to look into it.
Threatening journalists attempting to report on Claudia's disappearance has been common. And according to one startled Sky News reporter, who was the North of England correspondent, Gerald Tubb, when he was investigating and reporting on Claudia's disappearance, he wrote an article in 2015, and he wrote, "For a privately educated daughter of a country solicitor, Claudia had some unusual acquaintances, and this remains the only missing person case where I've been warned off or threatened, not once, but twice." He also went on to say, "And why are there so many undercurrents to the mystery, with some people still unwilling to talk to journalists and others issuing warnings or threats?"
Yeah, and pretty clearly, in a nutshell, the police were just getting nowhere with this one. So about 7 months after the disappearance itself, North Yorkshire police went onto Crimewatch, which at the time was the biggest crime show in Britain. It was a real hit. It had obviously helped catch so many criminals over the years, identify people. It was what really projected so many cases into mass media. And North Yorkshire police obviously did go on to this show with good intentions, but in my opinion, they did very much hinder the case in terms of public support. Let's have a little listen to what they said.
As the investigation has developed, it's apparent that some of Claudia's relationships had an element of complexity and mystery to them. I'm certain that some of those relationships were not known to a family or a friend. I need to know the details of those relationships, and I would urge anybody that was involved in a relationship with Claudia or knew of one that a friend, a colleague, a neighbour was involved in, please, if they're going to be discreet and if they want to actually enable us to deal with it in a controlled way, in a confidential way, they need to pick up that phone and give the call tonight.
So just initially, because you hadn't really delved deep into the case before, once you watched that, what was your interpretation of what was said there?
To be fair, it completely changed everything for me. I've gone from looking at this woman who seemed to be a very wholesome character, someone who'd integrated herself into the community, who had loads of friends, family loved her, privately educated. She had everything going for her, didn't she? And the fact that she was single and went out for a few drinks with her mates didn't really concern me. It seems like something incredibly normal. And then this guy goes on the TV. And I don't know, I think if you're being fair to him, you go, he spoke weirdly, spoke improperly, and maybe used some terminology that he probably shouldn't have done. At the other end of that, you could say he's intentionally painting the picture of a woman that is false. Like basically the way that he said like mysterious, do you know what I mean? Like encounters.
Yeah.
Like basically it was a woman who had a few one night stands, who went out, enjoyed herself, met men, like basically had a normal life
in 2009.
Literally like completely normal. And he's painted her out to be some sort of like harlot. And do you know what? There was this podcast that I listened to. Do you know Emma Kenny? Really good psychologist. She does a really good podcast all about this. Again, she has a point about this. Is like there's an immediate belittling of this woman. Like basically, in other cases, it's like sex workers immediately belittled, almost like they're sort of asking for these sort of instances that happen.
Well,
which is
funny
completely
to
unfair.
just interrupt you there. The Yorkshire Ripper. A lot of people only started not taking him seriously, but like only started really public outcry to catch the Yorkshire Ripper when he started killing women that were known to not be sex workers. So I completely understand where you're coming from about that sort of belittling that you talk about there.
Yeah, and then so basically this starts a chain of events, doesn't it? Where basically we're seeing mainstream media outlets going and sort of saying that she's a home wrecker, that she's having affairs, and that has a result on the case itself. Basically, people stop coming forward because they could have had, like, might have had an affair with her, they might have just had a one-night stand with her, and they don't want to be implicated in the case as a murderer.
They might just be scared of their girlfriend,
Yeah.
right? So say, for example, if I had a controlling girlfriend or something like that, the Nag's Head pub is my local. She moans at me all the time, oh, what are you even doing down there? You spend all your time in the pub. I could be innocently playing the fruit machine and sinking a few beers on my own. But once that cop has gone on Crimewatch and said that, my overprotective girlfriend, my insecure girlfriend that I could hypothetically have, all of a sudden thinks that I've either killed or had an affair with Claudia Lawrence. So I think that I don't think that we're speaking out of term to say that what he did there, whether he intentionally did it or not, it did portray Claudia in quite a negative light. And I think that there's been recent cases, I think like to the Jay Slater case, for example. Jay Slater was a young British teenager who went missing in Tenerife, right? And very soon after he went missing, a lot of his background came out. And obviously he was involved in, I believe it was a machete attack a couple of years before he went missing. And that then meant that a lot of the public didn't really have the support for him, to want to find him and whatnot. This was a man that went to court and was involved in a machete attack, not a woman who may or may not have had affairs. By the way, there's literally never been proven that she had an affair with anyone. So, although the police would obviously know more than me and you, I think that it was a misguided step. I think it took away from the public sympathy for her and therefore held back information. And we got to remember now, right? We live in a day and age now, in my opinion, and you can tell me if I'm wrong on this, Josh. We live in a day and age now where the media, the police, the government are all under one umbrella, in my opinion, right? And I believe what the media report is what the government want them to report, and what the police will report is what the police want themselves to report. The media, the government, it all comes under one thing. Back in the day, you didn't really get that, right? And I'm going to use you an example here. There was a woman in Bristol that was killed, and it was the landlord that ended up being arrested for it. I believe spent a little bit of time in prison, although there was no evidence, nothing to suggest that he did it. And it was actually one of the other tenants in the building that ended up doing it. However, this landlord had a creepy vibe about him. He was a teacher at a school that ex-students said he was erratic, he was weird and whatnot, and therefore the paper ran with an absolute media frenzy that it was this landlord that had killed the woman. They did the same with Robert Murat in the Madeleine McCann case, and this was something that the newspapers used to do, hence the end of papers like the News of the World and whatnot. Whereas nowadays, I feel like the newspapers very much go along with police forces and government. So say, for example, the obviously Southport terror attack, we were told via the mainstream media that was not a terror attack for quite a long time, and it was only after that we found that out. And I'll be very clear here, when I say a terror attack, the IRA were terrorists. I'm not saying this was something that was to do with ideology or anything like that. I'm saying that this man was found, the Southport stabber was found with a terror handbook at his home. He was found to have ordered terror kits and things like that. So what I'm saying is, back in the day, the mainstream media could very much set a narrative that I believe that they don't have as much of a threshold over now, and they're a lot more imposed to report what they're able to report by either police forces and government.
There's a lot of mistakes that went on in this case, weren't there? I think the media and the way that they handled it, I think, is a clear mistake. And the fact that we're implicating the BBC in this, I think, is fair, because they produce a show in which a detective goes on and uses language that he used, which is effectively a turning point in the entire case, right? So the media has some blame here. But also then let's talk about Galloway and his investigation, right? He, at the start, wants to believe several times that she's just gone missing of her own accord. She's done something, gone off with one of her new boyfriends and disappeared, gone to Cyprus. Like, they've gone down all of these avenues, haven't they? They've looked at all of these different things rather than going, is she missing right now? How can we find her? Was she murdered? Who were her, who could have accosted her? And they haven't done the due diligence and the police work early enough, because we know in these cases, these missing person cases, we've seen it in various things. Like we've done videos on, the Castro case about trying to find these young girls that were kidnapped. The first 24 hours is the key time of finding these people. And I think what Claudia's parents had said and what her friends had said is that they haven't given enough due diligence in finding her early enough. Do you know what I mean? And I think that was one of the key errors in this entire case that affected the outcome of it.
Well, I've got some good news for you, Josh, because there was actually some CCTV captured from that 24-hour period, which really, really raised a lot of suspicion, and you're about to see it on screen now as we're speaking. Obviously, the first bit of CCTV shows what we believe is a male figure walking to the side of Claudia's house, and there's a back alley that he disappears into, right? He's in that back alley for around a minute and a half, something like that. He walks back out, and he actually stops as he waits for a person crossing the road to pass. And then he continues to walk. Now, Josh, answer me this. Is there any way that could have been coincidence? Something came into his head. He thought, oh my God, I've left a chicken in the oven or something like that. Did that man at that moment stop because he did not want to be seen?
I think with the body language that you're looking at, and obviously you and I are body language experts, aren't we? We do this for a living. I think the way you saw it, both the time in which he was around the alleyway, so like a minute, and then also that stop is suspicious to me, and I think it was suspicious to the police, to be fair. The way he does stop, and I mean, maybe I'm reading into this, but I thought that person crossing the road was in high vis. Don't know if you remember that, but they were wearing something, bright and colourful. I think he stopped intentionally. Like, let's be honest, he didn't want to be seen. Now, what was weird about that is they crossed the road. I feel that person could have turned right and seen the guy, but obviously they didn't. He was wearing all black, wasn't he? And he didn't manage to do that. But I think this is a key moment in the case.
And the stop was right before he reaches the lamppost, which is obviously shining light down as well. So he was still in a sort of dark, secluded area. I think that the CCTV definitely shows that the man stopped because he did not want that person to see him. Now, this is around the time, by the way, that we are led to believe that Claudia Lawrence is in her house, potentially maybe even in bed. It's sort of around the time that those texts are coming in, and then this piece of CCTV emerges. Now, we cannot confirm from this piece of CCTV whether this is the same man or not. However, what we can confirm is whoever this is does the same thing, goes round to the back, goes to that back alley, and then comes back out of the back alley after a moment or so. Now, that back alley is the sort of back passage to 3 houses and the Nag's Head pub. But obviously all of those houses will have access from their side to that alley. So there's no reason for anyone from the street to walk up to that back alley. But there's a problem here, Josh. That footage that you and me just saw got released 7 years after the disappearance.
Do you know why it was released so much later?
I've got absolutely no idea.
It wasn't in the moment. Because, I mean, that could have solved the case. Someone could have recognised that guy and what he was wearing that night, could have seen him out and about, and that would have affected the witness statements, wouldn't it?
Yep, definitely. And I think that the timings very much like link in, because although we can't confirm whether that was the same person in each case, the timings link in well with the time that Claudia was at home texting friends and whatnot, and the time that she was known to leave for work. Now, the police's main theory is that whatever happened to Claudia happened at the hands of someone that she knew, and therefore the timings are very, very significant. However, they weren't ever able to give a suspect as to who the male in the footage was, or really what significance the footage has. So what do you know about official suspects for this case?
Well, what's really interesting is that, we said earlier on that there aren't that many witnesses wanting to come forward. The police, in the course of their investigation, have had over 1,000 statements, and they've searched over 240 properties to try and find suspects. They've actually arrested near enough a dozen people in the case, which, to say that they still haven't found the outcome of this is absolutely mad. Now, I did my research on this, and when I do my research, I do come up with some very, useful information
Oh,
in these
he does.
cases. And
He
there
does.
are so many suspects, Joey. I've actually had to cut this down because otherwise we'd be talking about it all day and all night. And the first suspect that we have to go through is, and you know what it's like in these cases, Joey, it's always the ones that are closest to these people, is the casual boyfriend. Have you ever been described as a casual boyfriend?
Not to my face.
Well, this casual boyfriend, apparently, I don't know if you've heard of this guy in your research, there's a guy called Dean Whitehand. Have you ever heard of him?
No.
Jen King, who was one of Claudia's best friends, accused this guy effectively on Facebook at the time and called him out. So you know what it's like.
She was one of the women that was supposed to meet Claudia in the Nag's Head that
Exactly.
night.
She was one of her best mates. And she said that this guy was one of the casual boyfriends that Claudia had seen. So that's the first one that they looked at. Now, they looked into him. There was no evidence of any impropriety. And so he was written off pretty soon after that. Now, there was also, I don't know if you've seen this, there was an account by the boss who had said she'd come into work the previous day. She'd looked a bit knackered. And he had said to her, oh, you know, what's wrong? You don't, you know, it's pretty unusual for her, to be fair, because she was quite prompt and diligent at work. She got on with her job. Do you know what I mean? Like, she was quite a good, you know, chef and, you know, did what she did. And he came in and she said, yeah, basically I'd been out the night before. I was a bit knackered and I was with a friend, a male friend. And they've tried to find this guy and they've never been able to find him either. So again, police would want to question this guy.
Yep.
I mean, he's someone that has spent potentially an intimate evening with Claudia.
And
so
he's never come forward.
Never come forward. So again, this is the thing, like there's so many people here that are involved in this that have never even been questioned by the police, which is really, really concerning. Now, there was also a car that they had seen driving around the area. Again, we'll show some footage on this. It brakes very suddenly near the house, near the pub actually, wasn't it?
Slams on the brakes pretty much outside Claudia's house. Bearing in mind, Claudia's house was pretty much outside the pub. It was 3 doors down or so. So just because it stopped outside Claudia's house doesn't necessarily mean that was to do with Claudia. It could have been anything really. It could have been something outside of the pub. Someone could have felt that they thought that they'd seen a friend. I know when I drive past pubs, I always have a little look to see who's about locally and stuff like that. So not a massive lead, but again another suspect.
Not even a person, is it? We just got a car to go on, but again, nothing came of that. Now
they don't drive themselves.
They don't drive themselves. Well, now they do actually, Joe. Interestingly enough, there was another guy that I've looked into called George Pavlo. Have you ever heard of this?
Oh,
chap?
the Pavmeister.
The Pavman. He was an owner of a restaurant called the Voodoo Lounge in Swangate in York, and his brother and him were apparently accused of molestation, sexual touching of a woman in her 20s in the early hours of the night before.
Really?
So again, the police looked into him and he got off scot-free. There was nothing in relation to Claudia's disappearance. But again, you know, another person they questioned. In May 2014, there was actually someone arrested, a 59-year-old man that was arrested in suspicion of murder, and he had 2 houses searched and his car seized. And again, that came to nothing. In July 2014, another person was arrested. This time it was a 46-year-old man in York, and he was arrested actually this time rather than on murder. He was arrested on suspicion of perverting the course of justice. And again, let off scot-free.
Now, when you say perverting the course of justice, I remember about this, and obviously that is where those sort of Peter Blexley comments came to significance for me, because perverting the course of justice suggests that maybe this could have been one of the people who had warned journalists and just sort of anyone looking into the case off, you know, because if you were to ask me, Sam, and I said, listen, we don't speak about that round here, I think the police would want to speak to me. So who knows what perverting the cause of justice actually means in reference to that case.
And it's interesting as well because this guy that was arrested, he had his basement of his pub dug up. Did you know that?
I know that,
yeah,
but I also know that the concrete of that basement was laid 20 years prior, and Claudia had gone missing. I think by that point it was something like, what was it, 6 years prior?
You'd be fuming. To be fair, I understand why this guy's angry. I'd be.
Do you reckon they paid the police to relay that?
You would have to if there was nothing found.
Yeah.
You'd have to.
Yeah,
surely.
But the point was he was able to prove that concrete had been laid 20 years earlier. To be honest, though, if I was Claudia's family and whatnot, I would still want it done.
You take everything done. You would. Now, in 2015, someone confessed to the crime. Now, what do you think of that? Because apparently that should be an open and shut case, really, if someone's confessed to it.
It is, unless you're an absolute fucking nutter who just wants a bit of time out of their jail cell.
Yeah. So apparently this guy, Daniel Oxley, is the guy that they implicated. He was 22 years old. And his lawyer said that he was attention-seeking and grandiose thinking was to blame for this confession. So, again, the police ride that off pretty quickly, don't they? So another suspect done. Now, there are other sightings and other people implicated. There was a male friend in Cyprus that we've discussed. There was also this white van. Have you heard about this white van? There was a rusty white van seen in the area, and a man that was peering out of this and apparently soliciting women and sort of like basically, catcalling them.
Yep.
And it was over the course of a week prior to that. And again, they've never been able to find the owner of that white van. So
one of the most common, I don't want to call it conspiracies, but theories around this case was that a man who is already serving multiple life sentences behind bars, Christopher Hallowell, could have an involvement in this case. Now, he was called in and questioned about the Claudia Lawrence case, and there was a segment from an interview with him where he said, look, if I give you information on this case, can you guarantee me that you're not going to keep bringing me here every 6 months or a couple of years and whatnot to ask me about new cases and things like that? Now, it is heavily suspected by police that Christopher Hallowell did more than just the 2 murders that he's been charged for. He was a man that was originally arrested after being a taxi driver quite some distance away, about a 3-hour drive away from where Claudia disappeared from. But he had been a taxi driver who murdered a woman, and when he went to actually show the police where he had buried her body, he turned around to the police officer in question and asked him, do you want another one? To the police officer's dismay, Christopher Hallowell was offering another body of a woman that he had killed, and therefore they linked him to Claudia Lawrence's disappearance. Now, you may say, well, why is this? He was hours away and whatnot, and there's multiple serial killers, but Christopher Hallowell did have some links to the sort of Yorkshire area. I think his father lived about a 40-minute drive or something like that.
Huddersfield he lived in, which is quite a considerable distance away. Yeah, nearly an hour drive from York.
Yeah. But one of the main things was Christopher Hallowell was a left-handed smoker who matched the description of the accounts that the initial people who had came forward said that they saw. And when they were given images of Christopher Hallowell and said, look, do you think it could be this man? They said yes, there's a possibility it could. Neither were certain or anything like that, but they said, yeah, there's a possibility it could. So he was a suspect too.
He was, and very interestingly, on the day of the disappearance, he had actually broken up with his ex-girlfriend at the time. So again, there were a lot of things, and I suppose random coincidences that made it seem like this guy was implicated. Now, the parents actually were so dismayed that he wasn't properly questioned and arrested, I suppose, on the suspicion of murder. They actually said that it's a disgrace. They said police haven't been spending enough money, so they very much felt that he could be connection. And there was actually a witness that said that they had seen him in another setting, and again talking to other women as well. So there's a lot of stuff that could implicate him, but again, never been charged. He's in prison for the rest of his life for those 2 murders. So, it seems like he's got off scot-free if he was implicated in this disappearance. So is this the end of the story then? We've got to the end of our suspects. No one's officially been charged or arrested, and no one's been found guilty of the disappearance or kidnap or murder of Claudia. Is this now where we sort of have to say to the audience, yeah, that's it. We don't really know what happened to her and we all have to move on?
It could be. It could well be, but I don't think it'd make for a very good podcast if it did. And that's why, Josh, I'm about to tell you that I do not believe that the police have the correct timeline of events on this case.
You're saying to me that everything we've heard so far is wrong?
I think that most things we've heard so far are wrong. The official date that Claudia Lawrence went missing, according to the police, is the 19th of March. And that was when she left that morning to go to work, wasn't it?
Yes.
And what were the reasons, Josh, that they determined that she had left to go to work?
I think that they had said that they'd found breakfast items in her sink when she left. They said that all of her house was, as it normally would be. They said that they'd found work items.
The
and it all
rucksack,
felt
her chef
normal.
whites, her mobile phone.
Straighteners.
And straighteners. This is where it comes into it. This was something that didn't come out immediately. Hair straighteners, right? This was something that didn't come out immediately. I don't know why it didn't. Maybe they thought it was insignificant. However, hair straighteners is something that a woman would typically use each morning. Now, I don't know, maybe because of weather, you might take them to work with you. But most people, most women I know, use their hair straighteners before they leave the house. They don't take them to work. They use them before work, right? So that for me got me thinking. And it started to make me think about this case and about the timeline of this case. And why would those hair straighteners be missing? Now, the last we know, Claudia Lawrence officially was at her home when she spoke to her father on the evening of the 18th, right? And she said she was at home to her father, and her father had confirmed this. However, what you tell your parents and what you're actually doing doesn't always go in line, does it? And I think that with the fact that the police have searched so hard to find answers for this case and obviously fallen short, I don't think it's, I don't think it's vindictive in any way. I don't think it is slander in any way to look into the potential that maybe they've got this timeline wrong and that maybe Claudia wasn't honest with her father on the phone that night. Because let's be honest, right? Have you ever had it when you were younger and whatnot, and your mum rings you and she says, "Oh, where are you?" And you say, "I'm round at Joey's. We're just chilling here." You're not at Joey's.
No.
You're at a bird's house.
Yeah.
You're at a bird's house.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. So that call could have come in, and it could have been that Claudia wasn't at home during that time. And do you know what else gives me some evidence to feel that potentially she couldn't have been at home?
Go on.
The police have never released the information as to where those two calls came from to her mother and to her father on the day that Claudia was last seen. So the day when the CCTV footage came out, they never released that information. The police have never confirmed whether that call was made from her home or not. So that call may not have been made from her home. Now, what about the text messages she received? Now, I haven't got the text messages to be able to put up on screen now, but going into the case, looking it over, I can confirm to you, right, that in the strings of messages, the hundreds of messages that police had been able to get through phone records from Claudia's phones, right, and read the texts, Claudia would often, if not always, finish her messages with an X on the end, with a kiss, what we call it, on a text message, right? Now, that night, the man she texted in Cyprus, she texted him saying something along the lines of absolutely knackered, got 11 days work now in a row without a rest, no partying for me. However, significantly, although the other texts to that man did have a kiss on the end, that one single text did not have a kiss on the end of it, right? Small margins are where sometimes we find errors in cases, and something like that can potentially be a lot more important than we actually realise. Another thing is, where she worked, she couldn't have worked there 11 days in a row because they were open 6 days a week, right? And then when you look at the fact that the police determined that because there was breakfast apparatus in the sink, washing up in the sink, that she'd obviously left for work because she had had breakfast that morning, right? But the bed was made upstairs, okay? So if the bed was made, why was the breakfast not put away?
Okay, I see what you say.
I'm not saying it's a big deal.
Yeah.
I'm just saying there's inconsistencies here.
Did you hear about what she'd left in the apartment? She'd left her purse, all of her bank cards. Do you hear about this?
Yeah, yeah.
Which is also interesting.
And
Like,
her
she left quite
and her
quickly.
passport. And her passport.
Yeah.
However, at that time, long before contactless, to be honest, in most pubs in 2009, I remember myself, you paid everything cash over the counter. Very rarely did I use a card at that time. So I don't think it's that weird that she left her bank card. I think that the whole theory about, escaping to Cyprus, straight away you can write that off because she had left her passport at home.
People have said she was in the back of a van. Some people have said
why
it's
would
ridiculous.
she need to?
Yeah,
Why
yeah.
would she need
Basically,
to,
they did a lot of research on that, and they couldn't find her in
She was
Cyprus.
a 35-year-old woman. If she wanted to go and do a season in Cyprus,
She could have
or
done
live
it.
in Cyprus, she could have just done
and
it,
told
right?
her family.
And told
Yeah.
her family. So, because of all these things, right, my suspicion is that Claudia Lawrence did not leave her house that morning. I believe that Claudia Lawrence actually did arrive home from her shift at work that day. I think she did speak to these people on the phone. I'm not sure whether she was in her house when she spoke to her dad on the phone. I think as much as I have, dug my heels into the police about their mishandling of this case, right, in terms of saying that she was potentially someone who had secretive relationships and stuff like this, I believe that maybe there was a secretive relationship, and I believe that maybe the man or the partner who she was in that relationship with saw Claudia the night of the disappearance. Potentially, maybe the rucksack, the chef whites, and the straighteners were taken because she had planned to spend the night somewhere else. Do you think that's out of the realms of possibility?
I don't think it is at all. But the question that I've got then is, what happened to her? Like, do you have an idea of who you think the person was, or do you I presume you just feel like it's a boyfriend, a casual partner, a one night stand, someone that she'd met recently, and that something went awry from there.
Again, I have no idea. My main sort of theory on the case would probably be something along the lines, as ironic as it sounds, and as much as I sort of stuck the knife in, and I still don't think it was the right thing to do at the time they did it on Crimewatch, I think that maybe Claudia could have been having a secretive relationship. It could have been an affair. It could have been an affair that she didn't know about. It could have been one that she had no idea that this man potentially has a wife and children at home and things like that. She could be completely innocent and naive of knowing of this, but I believe she probably met her fate that night, or in the early hours of the morning. Now, one more thing that would back it up was that Claudia's phone was manually turned off at around midday on the 19th of March. So the last time she's seen or heard from is the 18th, and on the 19th, her phone is manually turned off. That does not mean it died, lost signal, ran out of battery. It's turned off. Still in the area, but not able to locate exactly where. So I think that's pretty much it in terms of the case covered itself, isn't it? Obviously, I do believe, unlike many other cases, right, I think, we covered the Madeleine McCann case recently and whatnot, and there's so many conspiracies around it and so much there, but I do believe that the people that know are most likely in that case to take it to the grave with them now, and I don't believe we'll ever find out what happened to Madeleine McCann. I feel like there are so many genuine people who know, and way more than we realise, that either lived in this area, that still reside in this area, maybe don't know how, Claudia met her fate and what happened to her, but do know more about those secretive relationships that she had. And again, I do think this is one that one day we will find out an answer to.
Do you know who I feel sorry for the most? Her father recently, 3 years ago, passed away.
2021, I think it was.
Passed away without knowing what happened to his daughter. And he actually campaigned for a long time. As you said, he was a solicitor. She's actually got her own law now, which is all about having, control of someone's affairs when they are missing. So she's had a lasting impact in the law of the UK, and Pete's campaigning.
That was Pete's campaign itself that did that. What an honourable man, absolute you know, integrity right until the very end. Spoke so well. I said to you off camera, like, I felt so sorry for the father, man.
Yeah.
He seemed like such a lovely, lovely man. But yeah, people, that is the disappearance of Claudia Lawrence. Let us know your thoughts in the comment section next. I know we have had a lot of shouts for cases that you guys would like to see. The Andrew Gosden case is obviously one of them that a lot of people want to hear us talk about. We've got a lot in the pipeline. So I think for one last time, Josh, why don't you just tell them about the perks of the channel membership?
So the members get all of the videos that we do up to 72 hours early, which is just ridiculous, isn't it? Like,
I'm going to give you a little spoiler here, mate.
Yeah.
The last time it was more than 72 hours.
This is just insane.
It was up to 3 days.
We are just so organised that we're getting them up.
the gift that keeps on giving.
Shout out to Joe, the editor, for doing all this. He never gets a shout out on the channel.
Shout
Big
out, Joe.
And then if you also want even more content than that you've got this fix that you really want to get, we're also doing weekly live streams. We're about to record one right now.
Yep. And the live streams go out specifically to the members. After that, they'll obviously be uploaded. You can find them on our YouTube channel. But to be there live, to get your questions in, it's not like your usual live stream where you need to give super chats and things like that. You purely need to be a member and you can be in there live. And because of that, it means that you're pretty much all of you are going to get your questions answered and whatnot.
So honestly, it's worth it just for that. But it's not only just that. There's loads of other stuff. We'll be doing behind the scenes chats. We'll be doing photos, videos for everyone as well. So yeah, the memberships are well worth it. There's a link in the description below, or there's a big join button if you're watching on your laptop or your tablet. So join it and it'll be well worth your time. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you in the next video.